Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see everyone for our weekly Zera Shimshon class. Yes, you too, Barry. And again, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Aviva and Yehuda ben Chorin, for tonight's class. May Hashem bless them with continued success for their children, their grandchildren, and may they live long, healthy, happy lives to rejoice with their great-grandchildren. Amen v'amen. This week we are in a very, very great Parashat to learn about. A lot of tremendous lessons. It's sad also right from the beginning, but then it starts getting better towards the end. So we're going to take a little gloomy episode of our Torah, and we're going to try to beautify it, specifically understanding what a woman of valor is. And this was Sarai Imenu. So just as an introduction, Sarai Imenu did not know of Abraham's prophecy and idea to go sacrifice their son Isaac. Mind you, they were waiting decades to have this boy. Abraham was 100, Sarah was 90. As we learned last week, Sarah did not have the capabilities of becoming pregnant. Hashem gave her a womb. She didn't have one. And she had all these miracles and all these promises and all this hope. All of that to go to a sacrifice? She didn't know of it. Abraham had the divine prophecy. Takes Isaac, heads to Har HaMoriah, to the place where Hashem is going to show him. Now Sarah didn't know of this. The Midrash tells us that the Satan, the evil inclination, dresses up as an old man and rides on a camel and comes to Sarah and says, "Hey Sarah, did you hear the news?" She said, "What news? Fake news? Real news? Which news?" So this was fake news. Okay? Says, "Do you know what your husband's doing?" Well, it depends on how you interpret it. Like all news. "Did you hear what your husband's doing with your son?" What could they be up to? They're always doing good things. They're doing mitzvot together. No. This time, your husband is taking your son and he's binding him and he's going to slaughter him and send him as a sacrifice to God. And Sarah was so bothered. Again, so long waiting for this son. How could this be the end of this child? Mind you, he wasn't a child. He was 37 years old, as we learned last week. How could this be the end? To the point where the Midrash said she was so bothered, she was searching and looking, trying to go out in the fields, out in the city, to see where they were, and she couldn't find them. She goes and she asks her slaves and her servants to go search, couldn't find. Finally, she goes and she finds the great giants. 3 of the great giants that fell, 3 of the 4 that fell from the sky in Parashat Bereshit. And she asks them, "Can you please look at the far mountain, far away, Har HaMoriah, where I was told where Isaac and my husband Abraham should be? And can you tell me what you see over there?" So the giants look and they say, "Hey, we found them. And we see your husband binding Isaac with a knife in his hand, about to slaughter. And then a cloud came, and we couldn't see the rest, and the rest was history, covered up." She was so sad. The Midrash says that she was banging her head against the wall. She was so sad, and she was crying. We could all imagine the loss of a child, or one's husband slaughtering your own child. It's crazy. She was very, very bothered. Then, at that moment, the Satan comes back, disguised in a different garb, and tells her, "You see, don't listen to whatever that old man said to you. Isaac is still alive." And at that point, the Midrash says that her emotions were tampered with so much, meaning, is Isaac going, or is Isaac alive? And she passed away mirov simcha, out of joy that Isaac really was still alive. It's something that we are familiar with, that when emotions go back and forth, a person's heart can, 127 years old, a person could have a heart attack just from sadness back to joy. This mixture of emotions, and this is one opinion. There's different opinions on why exactly Sarah passed away right now, but this is the opinion the Ma'am Loez brings down, of the reason why Sarah Imenu passed away. Because at first she was told Isaac is dead or being put to death, and then the Satan comes to tell her, no, he's really okay, and that's how he succeeded, the Satan, to have Sarah pass away. Again, the Satan, the evil inclination, was trying and doing everything it could to stop Abraham and Isaac from going and fulfilling this 10th test. Through different voices. The Midrash says that the Satan made a big river blocking on the way going to Har Moriah, and none of that worked. So you know what he said? If I can't get to the two of them, let me go get Sarah. So he tried the devastating news to Sarah. That didn't work. Then he tried giving the good news, and then that worked. So the Satan was just trying any way possible to try to ruin and sabotage this test that Abraham had to do at this moment. With this introduction, now the Torah comes back and tells us that Sarah Imenu lived a life of 127 years old. Sounds like a very long life, a very full life, and this is why the vernacular of the verse in this pasuk says, "Vayu Chaye Sarah," and the life of Sarah was 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. Rashi has one interpretation of 100 like 20 and 20 like 7. However, it's also alluding to the fact that she had a full and complete, successful, useful life. And this was Sarah Imenu. At this point, Avraham Avinu comes back to news he wasn't privy to news which saddened him. Now the news saddened him in an obscure way, as the way the Torah says it. Listen to this. I'm in verse 2 of chapter 23, right? Second verse of this week's parasha. It says, Vatamot Sarah passes away, B'Kiryat Arba hi Chevron, in city of Kiryat Arba, in the area of Chevron, Be'eretz Canaan, in the land of Canaan, which is Israel. Vayavo Avraham, and Abraham comes, Lispod le Sarah velifkota, to eulogize Sarah and to cry for her. The Zera Shimshon asks a very obvious question. What happens first when someone passes away? Do you eulogize them first or do you cry first? Anybody? What happens? You cry first! Why does the Torah say that Abraham comes and he eulogizes Sarah and then cries for her? The Zera Shimshon says it should be opposite. It should be cries for her and then eulogizes her. First question. There's 3 questions he's asking, okay? They're easy to remember, so don't worry. Second question he asks is, this you would notice if you look into the Torah scroll this Shabbat, the word Velif Kotav, which means that Abraham cried for his wife, has a small letter in the middle. The kaf is small. The Zera Shimshon is wondering, what's the reason for this? Yes, there are times in our Torah, very few times in our Torah, that some of the letters are smaller and some are bigger, but anytime that happens, there's a reason. The Zera Shimshon wants to know, what's the reason? Is there any connection to maybe the order of first eulogizing and then crying? The third question he asks is, well, why does the Torah need to tell us that he came to eulogize Sarah? It should just say that he came to eulogize her and to cry for her. Why? Lispod le Sarah. It should say lispod velifkot, lispoda velifkota, or lispod la velifkota. Why specifically is Sarah there? If you go to the beginning of the verse tells us that she passed away, obviously. So is there another unlocked secret in the fact that it's Sarah he came to eulogize and then cry for her? Okay? Listen to the following. The Zera Shimshon answers this based on another Italian Kabbalist which lived a century before him, who wrote the book called Ma'avar Yabok. Ma'avar Yabok, it's a quite rare sefer, it's a deep sefer. It was written by Rabbi Aharon Berechia ben Moshe of Modena. Okay? 17th century Italian Kabbalist and author. He says something which is very meaningful, and any of us who's ever, and I'm sure all of us have been at this point in our lives, anyone who's ever attended a eulogy or a funeral or delivered a eulogy, what he's about to tell us is something very, very meaningful, something very important for us to know, and it's in 3 points. The first point he says is, the main benefit of a eulogy is for the deceased. Of course, we understand that when one delivers a eulogy, we try to evoke the congregation or the people that come and gathered to remember the person, to repent, to do good in that person's merit, to be better people, to think of life as not being something that's everlasting, rather there's a purpose in life. But after all of those reasons, the main reason for a eulogy is really for the sake of the deceased. How so? The Ma'avarya book explains. He says that when the people in the crowd cry, that crying is really what unlocks the gates and removes part of the burden of the judgment that the soul goes through while it's passing. When a person passes away, their soul is judged in front of God. Melech Malchem Lachim, King of Kings, God Almighty. It's something which is judgment. Judgment is judgment. Yeah, we asked Hashem to sprinkle some mercy upon it, some compassion, but it's serious. You know what helps the deceased? It's the tears that the people that come at the eulogy and come to the burial and to the funeral, those tears is what helps that person. How so? The Talmud says that Hashem locked all gates. The gates, or really when I say locked, He holds the keys. He holds the keys to livelihood. He holds the keys to the gates of health. He holds the keys to the gates of childbearing. Hashem is the one who holds the keys to all that. There's one key that the Jewish people have that are able to unlock almost any gate. And that is, as the Talmud says, Sha'arei dim'a lo nin'alu, that the gates of tears have not been locked by Hashem. Can you imagine if you would take someone's tears and put that into a lock that you don't have the key for, and then the door would open? This is the power of tears, the Ma'avarya book says. So firstly he says, the purpose of the eulogy is great merit and great reward for the deceased. How so? Through the crying. But now he ends off. What is a person supposed to be crying for? We're supposed to be crying for the physical loss, the loss that this person is no longer with us? No. Rather, crying for the sake of the departed soul from this body. For the sake of the soul, for the sake of that person, opposed to the sake of them physically not being here anymore, because of what they're enduring. Having said this, the Zera Shimshon now, he goes on to answer our questions. He first answers our second question of why is there a small chaf? You know why there's a small chaf? Because Avraham Avinu held back from his crying. Why? He wasn't crying because he was sad. Can you imagine Avraham Avinu was crying because he was sad that he lost his wife? Didn't he understand everything's from God? I mean, he was ready to sacrifice his own son. I mean, it's up for debate. Who did Abraham love more, his wife or his son? It's up for debate. The fact that he was willing to go and sacrifice his son means that he has complete belief and trust in Hashem. Whatever Hashem does is always for the good. So Abraham now is coming back and he's crying for the loss of his wife? No, it's minimized crying. He's crying for the sake of his wife. He's crying at the eulogy he's delivering for his wife. And that answers the first answer. He came lispod lesara v'lifkota. He came to eulogize her, and that's when he cried. Avraham Avinu, according to this interpretation, he's going to give a different answer. But the Zera Shimshon is saying Avraham Avinu was at such a high level that when his wife passed away, he did not cry. Because he accepted it from the Almighty as it is decreed from him and is the best thing that could possibly happen. And so then when did he cry? He cried during the eulogy. So he came lispod lesara, he came to eulogize his wife, and he cried then. You know why he cried then? To evoke the emotions of the people that came to cry for her as well, for the benefit of her soul departing from the body and raising up and having an easier judgment. This is the first answer the Zera Shimshon gives. Another answer he gives, and some might say this sounds like a more human answer, is that really Avraham Avinu cried when he heard the news. He's a human just like us. Greater powers, he's obviously a prophet, but he was still a human being. But the Torah is not coming and telling us, as Shimshon says, something obvious. The way emotions of a person work is that when their emotions are tampered with or they're touched, could be even something happy, but obviously something sad, the eyes well up and start tearing. But that's not what the Torah is coming and telling us about Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu was way beyond that. So he cried then, of course. But you know when he really cried for his wife? He really cried for his wife way later. Meaning past the eulogy. He cried before the eulogy. He cried during the eulogy. He cried after. But lispod lesara velivkota, and he cried for her forevermore. The Zera Shimshon says anytime he remembered his wife, and he didn't remember the fact that, oh, now she's not here anymore. That's a fact of life. It's a circle of life. You sometimes lose somebody. It's hard to deal with. But Avraham Avinu was at a very high level. But you know when he cried? He cried when he remembered all the great things she did. We cannot forget that Sarah Imenu was Avraham's partner. Avraham couldn't do anything without his wife. She took care of literally 50% of the population that they were converting to monotheism. She took care of all the women. She was the anchor of the house. When he thought of all of those spiritual achievements that were completed yet no longer able to do, that's when he cried. And this was for years on end. So lispod le Sarah, the eulogy that he gave Sarah, he came to give it specifically for her. Then the word Sarah, the Zera Shimshon says, breaks up. He came to eulogize his wife. Stop. Velivkota, he cried for her forevermore anytime he thought of the greatness of his wife that is now no longer here with him to continue his mission towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu and towards bringing back people. Avraham Avinu was 137 when his wife passed away. He lived till 175. That's a good amount of years to be alone. After building and going through so much together, it's not easy. But why Sarah? So listen to what the Zera Shimshon says. He says normally at a eulogy, a wife is praised also on account of what her husband accomplished. This is something that's done. And it's vice versa. The Zera Shimshon says when Abraham praised his wife at her eulogy, it was specifically le Sarah, for what she accomplished, the great deeds, the great accomplishments that she was able to do for the people of the world at that time. It was specifically to her. As a lesson from this is something for us to all remember of. How do we remember our loved ones who've perished? Do we remember them, and are we sad about their loss because they're not physically here anymore? Or do we remember them for their great things, and we kind of wish they were here to share with us all of those greatnesses, but we know that they're in a greater place, and the reason why we shed tears for them is for their merit, and not to have an emotional consolation for ourselves. It's a very high level. It's very tough. It was put to me by one rabbi. Said the following. I went to visit him when his father passed away unexpectedly, and I told him, Rabbi, how are you containing yourself so well? He said, let me explain you what it's like to lose a family member. It's kind of like when you go on vacation or when you move town and you're just not with your parent anymore. Is there communication? Is there any seeing? Is there any physical activity? No, you're just not with the person. You know that when you come back from your vacation, or you know that when you come back from your moving away from wherever it is that you're going to, away from your family member or your friend or whoever it is, you're going to see that person again. So too it is when a person passes away in this world, we need to find within us the belief that you're going to see this person again in the time of Mashiach. And it's just now you're on a break. So physically the person's not here, but spiritually they're still with you, just as if you're taking a trip away from that person you care about so much. The hard part nowadays are these, because then you're never away from people. This is the hard part. You're always able to communicate with people even when you're far away from them, which is a great thing, no? How great is it? You send your child to Israel for school. They go to New York. They're traveling for work. Okay, so it makes moving away from family a lot easier. But on the other hand, it makes it so much harder when someone passes away, even at an advanced age, because now you have absolutely no connection with them anymore, something you had all along. But in the real world, prior to the recent technology, that was a fact. You were away from somebody physically, there was no communication. And this is what makes it harder for us nowadays. But what we can do is we can prepare beforehand. Thank God now that everyone is alive and healthy, those of our family members who are, preparing for what's it going to be like when someone's lost. We need to prepare for success, prepare for our best behavior during those hard times, when we're able to, and that would be now. That's the first part of the Zera Shimshon we're going to speak about, and we're going to move on to the next. There's a very interesting exchange between Abraham and a real estate tycoon named Ephron. This guy was, maybe on camera I shouldn't say a name, a type of individual who was really into everything and involved in everything, and a landowner, and you had to bargain with the guy. This was Ephron. Abraham wanted to purchase a specific plot for his wife, a meaningful specific plot for his wife. Does anyone know where this was? Very good. Me'arat HaMachpelah, the double cave, if I would translate it properly. And this is for different reasons, because one interpretation is because it was literally 2 layers of a cave, or because they were the couples that were all buried in this cave. Machpelah means doubled over. So who was buried there already? Adam and Chava were buried there. So Abraham felt like it's very important that he is buried there, along with, well, his wife, and then eventually him, his son and his daughter-in-law, and his grandson and his granddaughter-in-law were to be buried there in order to serve as a great merit for the Jewish people for generations to come, as it is now. Any of us who's visited Me'arat Machpelah, it's a very moving, very tremendous area to be for prayers. And like all the holy sites, or very many of the holy sites of the Jewish people, our good-for-nothing cousins always like to congregate around it and take it over and control that area, being the Temple Mount, as well as the Me'arat Machpelah, amongst many. So there is a very, very special power over there. Avraham Avinu saw this years before. So he has this negotiation with Ephron, but he does a business tactic, something that we could all learn. He doesn't approach Ephron directly. He rather asks Bnei Chet, the children of Chet, the children of this tribe, to go approach and act as a broker to the landowner, something which is very common nowadays. When you want to purchase something, you get a middleman, because then the middleman, you hope he's on your side, but you really never know, right? Tries to massage both sides, make sure they get their cut and run. Okay. But that's what Avraham Avinu did. The way that this took place, if you read the verses, this is right in the beginning of our Torah portion this week, has very, very weird connotations of understanding how the sale actually took place. And the Zera Shimshon starts off by saying, if we look in chapter 23, verse 11, and I'll read it to you, it says, Lo Adoni Shema'eni Hasadeh natati lach ve'ame'ara shebo lecha natatia le'nei bnei ami natatia lach kevor metecha. So what's happening at this point is Ephron says, you don't need to pay me. Abraham offers to pay. Ephron says, take it for free. What happens towards the end of the first Torah portion? Ephron says, okay, you know what? Give me 400 silver coins. It's like if you come and you ask me to have a cookie, okay? Have a couple jelly bellies. Rabbi, what's the cost for the jelly bellies? Take it, no problem. No, Rabbi, I really insist. Okay, $25. $25 for a couple jelly bellies, or $18 for a couple jelly bellies. That's a lot. So the Zera Shimshon wants to know, was Ephron's intention to really give it for free or not? Because when you want to give something for free and then they insist to pay, so you give them a deal on whatever it is just to make them feel good. But you're not going to double charge them, triple charge them, tenfold charge them for it. And this is the question that Zera Shimshon asks. So he gives an answer that other commentaries give. He dismisses it, and you'll see why. And then he gives his own answer. He says that Ephron was worried about a certain halakha. The Gemara, the Talmud in Masechet Bava Metzia says, this is something you should know in business law and real estate law, just in case you didn't know that, there is a concept called a bar metzra. Has anyone heard of this law? It's a very interesting law. Could be very, very practical, especially in the business realm, and even in a domicile realm, meaning one's own home. That a neighboring property of a certain property which is now for sale has first rights to purchase its neighbor. Okay? For example, if we have two homes or two businesses over here, if the one on the right is for sale, the first person that this individual, this owner, should go to say that it's for sale to is to his neighbor. Now, it doesn't matter. It could be any of the neighbors, and there could be a bidding war on it. And the truth is that if someone comes from another city and bids higher on that property, well, of course, the landowner or the homeowner doesn't need to take a loss on it. But his first right of refusal or his first approach should always be giving it to an opportunity of a neighbor. The reason why is because a person knows that having two pieces of land or two homes adjacent to one another is obviously worth more in value than having one over here and one over here. For this reason, the Zera Shimshon says that some commentaries bring down that Ephron really had an issue because the children of Chet, Bnei Chet, were the neighbors of Ephron. They had the first right of purchase on that land of Merat HaMachpelah. So you know what Ephron said, I'm going to do? I'm going to gift it to you, Avraham, so this way that Bnei Chet can't come and say they want to buy it. The Zera Shimshon said that doesn't make sense, because what happens after? Ephron comes and says, Avraham, give me 400 silver coins. Was that a private thing? No. It was not a private arrangement. The money was actually given to Bnei Chet and then given to Ephron. It was in front of everybody. So if the Zera Shimshon is saying that they were trying to do something secretive almost, like gifting it to Avraham and then demanding money for it, well, that should all have been private if it's on the laws, based on the law of having the neighbor first right of purchase. For that reason, the Zera Shimshon says that cannot be the answer. Rather, he says the following. He says, based on the Gemara is in Masechet Kiddushin. This is also a very interesting fact. There was a rabbi, a Talmudic sage named Rav Gidal. And Rav Gidal was trying to buy a certain property. Now this property, in the middle of him trying to buy it, was bought unintentionally by another Talmudic sage, Rabbi Abba. It's like he snatched it from him. And again, we're talking Talmudic sages. We're not talking about real estate tycoons that are trying to just get a good deal. So one rabbi was trying to purchase it, and next thing he knows, it was already sold to another rabbi. And he was, bewildered. The second rabbi, Rabbi Abba, who bought the land, found out about this, and he really felt sorry, felt bad about it. So he went to the first rabbi, Rav Gidal, and he told him, I'm so sorry that I did this. Can I give you the land? So the rabbi said, I don't want something for free. Why should I give it to you? Sell it to me. So Rabbi Abba tells Rabbi Gidal, I can't sell it to you because this is the first property that I bought, and it's not a good omen to sell the first property that you've ever bought. Can you imagine? This is from the Talmud, straight out. There's concepts like this. I've met people, successful people, that they have their first house or their first little building, their first little shop that they never sell because they feel like it brings them beracha. It's true. Straight out from the Talmud. Interesting, no? So what happened is this rabbi said, I'll gift it to you because I didn't know you wanted to buy it. Another rabbi said, well, I can't take it. Soneh matanot yichyeh. A person should hate free things. A person should not look forward to gifts. So at the end, the Talmud says that the two of them didn't want to use the land, and the land was there given to rabbis to come and to stay as like a free lodging place, a free hotel for scholars that would come. Something very nice. Based on this, Zera Shimshon says, you know what happened between Ephron and Avraham? Ephron knew that Avraham would not want to take this for free. On the other hand, right, because he's a righteous person, righteous people don't like free things. But on the other hand, Ephron didn't want to sell Me'arat HaMachpelah to Avraham because it would be a bad omen. not because it was his first land, his first plot, but it's just not a good omen to sell a burial plot. To sell, nowadays the business took it the other way completely. But Ephron, being as much as a real estate tycoon as he was, he realized it would not be a good omen to sell a burial plot to someone else. So you know what he did? He gifted it to Avram, and then he told Avram, give me, between you and I, what's 400 silver coins? Like between you and I. Yehuda, we're good friends. What's $1 million between you and I? Like, come on, what is that already? Change, right? Right. And this is what Ephron did. A lesson we could learn from here is we could see how the righteous tzaddik, Avraham Avinu, dealt even with the world that he lived in, which wasn't such a straight world, which wasn't such a righteous world. He knew how to navigate. He knew how to put his head down sometimes, even if it meant getting ripped off to buy the burial plot that he saw fit, that was the right place for his wife and for his future descendants to be buried in. He went along with it. This is something great we learn from Avraham. It's something great that we should try to emulate ourselves. But there's another thing, and this is to protect us. That whenever someone tells you, between you and I, what is a certain amount? Know that they're trying to take you for a ride. Or when someone similarly comes and tells you, I wouldn't do such and such even if you gave me a certain amount. Or I would never sell you this property even if you gave me a ridiculous number. Know that that is now the price of sale. And understand, think about if it's worth it to you. It's like someone comes and knocks on your door. Right, Janice? Someone comes, knocks on your door and says, we'd like to buy your house. And you come and say, even for $1 million, I wouldn't sell the house. Now that person should know that's a sale price. Even if it's gouged, but that's a sale price. And now as a buyer, you should know, is it worth it or not? Because I'm not going to get them so much lower, right? You ever, as teenagers, you're walking across a bridge, especially here in Florida, and one guy says over to the other guy, I would never jump in there, even if you gave me $1 million. Well, the guy just said his price now. I can guarantee you, if you had $1 million cash, and of course he would survive, he'd risk his neck for it. In life, we have to know these things, that there are different schemes and different plots people use, and we have to be aware of them. Avraham Avinu was aware, and he succeeded in the world, in the corrupt world that he lived in. Not only emerging from an idolatrous society, but now coming to a new land by the guidance of Hashem, which had its trials and tribulations, minimum of 10, very, very hard ones, and he still came out doing the right thing and establishing a brand new nation of believing in one God and one God only. What the Zera Shimshon does in this parasha, right at the beginning of this week's parasha in his book, is he goes through explaining verse by verse the famous Eshet Chayil. The Midrash Tanchuma in this week's parasha tells us that the Eshet Chayil was first said by Abraham at his wife's eulogy. This is something that we say, that we have the tradition to say every single Friday night before the Kiddush. Before the Kiddush, which makes a lot of sense, right before we're going to attack the food. There's different houses, I make this joke quite often. There's some houses you go and there's Chaye salatim, 18 salads, and there's other houses you go and there's salat Chaye, only one live salad. Whatever it is, if you got the joke, good, if not, another time. Whatever it is that a wife is prepared for Shabbat, right before pouncing on it, even before, look how great it is, even before saying Kiddush and thanking Hashem for it and sanctifying the day, we take a pause and we thank our wife, we thank our mother, we thank our hostess, appreciating, exemplifying gratitude towards them for the amazing preparation that they put into whatever it is at this point. This Eshet Chayil, literally coined as the woman of valor, was delivered by Avraham Avinu at his wife's eulogy. The Zera Shimshon goes verse by verse. There is exactly 22 verses corresponding to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, starting with Aleph, Bet, and in order going all the way down. Approximately 875 years later, King Solomon, through divine prophecy, writes this, you could call it as a poem, at the end, the final 22 verses of his famous work, Mishle, Proverbs. There's 31 chapters in Proverbs, and the last 22 verses of that last chapter are these 22 verses that Abraham delivers. So we're going to this evening, go through four of the verses, 4 of the 22, and we'll have other occasions to maybe go through some others, but these 4 were literally handpicked, amazing, great qualities of a woman. Now these great qualities are lessons to both men and women. Men, to those of us who are not married, well, it's to, what are you going to look for in a wife? This potential girl that you're thinking of marrying, these are some things you'd look for. And for those of us who are married, let's go select and see the great qualities that our wife does have and thank her for them. Pay attention to them. And for a wife or for a woman, whether pre-marriage or after marriage, either before marriage or after marriage, for a wife to say, this is how God, this is how Abraham, this is how King Solomon, this is how our Jewish sages set out for a woman to be the most successful and the greatest in her life in this world, and remembered even after her passing. So we're going to do the third verse. We'll start with the third verse, Gimel. Gimel, as we know to say, is Gimaltahu Tov Velora Kol Yemei Chayeha. And I'll translate that. She bestows upon him good and not bad all the days of her life. Gimaltahu Tov Velora, she bestows upon him good and not bad. Kol Yemei Chayeha, all the days of her life. The Zera Shimshon asks a quite honest question. He says, well, if she is bestowing good, well, it's obviously not bad. So why does the pasuk have to say she bestows good and not bad? Just say she bestows good or she bestows no bad. What's the reason for the double up of she bestows good and not bad? Listen to how the Zera Shimshon answers. He answers based on a Gemara. This is a Gemara that every wife knows already. This is something that innately, anyone who doesn't believe in divine providence, well, they'll believe it after they hear this, because every woman has divine providence, nevuah, prophecy, because they know this. Whether they learned it or they didn't learn it, they know this. The Gemara says that the blessing of a home, the blessing of the man's home, if you want to put it that way, is dependent on one's wife. Now that is very, very heavy. On one hand, a wife can say, look at me, it's all based on me. But on the other hand, it's how the husband treats his wife and makes his wife feel and respects her and values her, and then her morale, her spirit will be on a high, and then all the blessing will come in as well. When there's peace in the home, that's when blessing comes to the home. If there's no peace in the home, everything's locked. To the point where even the tears of Sha'arei Dim'ah, the tears of the gates of tears cannot even be opened if there's no peace in the home. If a wife is not happy in the home, the blessing is shut. As soon as a wife is happy, literally like a faucet, boom, opens up and it comes pouring down uncontrollably, ad bilidai, on and on and on. So this is how the Zera Shimshon starts. He goes on to say that the reason for this, the reason that a person's blessing is dependent on his wife, is because a good wife trusts her husband. A good wife always trusts her husband, that her husband is doing the right thing, has his mind in the right place, doing what's in best interest of her and the family and the household. As the verse says elsewhere in Mishle, chapter 28, verse 20, it says, Ish emunot rav berachot. A trusted person has many blessings. Which is exactly this. A woman who trusts her husband will have many blessings. As soon as a wife doubts her husband, if he's spending his time well, if he's maybe interested in other women, chas v'shalom, that's when the pipelines of blessing start getting tampered with and closed off unfortunately, lo alenu v'lo alechem, not for us and not for anybody. The Zera Shimshon says the opposite is true too. We see by a sota wife, a wife who a husband suspects that she is maybe cheating on him. At that point, what's happening? The husband does not trust the wife, and the blessing in the household all falls to shambles. It all falls apart. The Zera Shimshon is teaching us something tremendous. He says the blessing of a person's household is dependent on one's wife. But the blessing of that household depends on a person's wife based on how the mutual trust goes. Does she trust him, and is she trustworthy? If she trusts him blindly, in town, out of town, traveling, business, pleasure, whatever it is, if he is trusted by his wife, and he trusts his wife, back and forth, that's when the blessing will be in the home, the Zera Shimshon says. Now he goes on to explain the verse. The verse says, Gimel Tahu Tov explains that reminding a husband, you know, when the blessing is bestowed, the good blessing is bestowed because of your wife. Velo ra, and there's no issue of any evil or lack of trust. This is when a person will have blessing. Now you might say, how is a person going to know that all the blessing in his household is dependent on his wife? That's how King Solomon ends off, Kol Yemei Chayeha. Because when a person's wife passes away, unfortunately he will realize, the husband will realize, that at that point, now the blessing is not the same as it was before. And where do we know this from? From this week's Parashat. When Sarai Menu passes away, 3 tremendous tragedies happen. Differences, changes. Firstly, there was no cloud over the tent anymore. Secondly, the candles of Shabbat did not light the same way. And third, and this is apropos to this conversation, there was no blessing in the dough, in the bread that was made. There's a special blessing that Sarai Menu had, that no matter how much she made, it always was enough to feed all the guests. And we know that they fed the guests by the hundreds. This was lacking. All of a sudden, Isaac and Abraham had to get into the kitchen and start making and start lighting the candles and start doing and making the food and all that stuff. It wasn't enough. It wasn't the same. It was dependent on Sarai Menu. How do we know this? We know this when Isaac gets married. I'm reading in chapter 24, verse 67. Vayvia Yitzchak ha'ohela. And Isaac brings his wife Rivka to the tent. Sarah imo, to the tent of Sarah, his mother. Vayikach et Rivka v'tehilo leisha. He marries Rivka. Vayihavea, and he loves her. Now the verse ends. Vayinachem Yitzchak ahare imo. And now Isaac is consoled after the passing of his mothers. 3 years passed, and he was not consoled. What consoled her? Our commentaries tell us, Rashi tells us, because these 3 things that were gone when Sarah passed away, all came back now. The blessing was back in the house when Rivka came back. The blessing in the food was there. So King Solomon says, Kol Yemei Chayeha, during her lifetime, you'll know the blessing is coming from her, or unfortunately will be withheld. But when she passes, then you'll see the immediate difference, unfortunately. Now we're going to move on to letter Ayin. Letter Ayin, the verse in Eshet Chayil says, take a step back. The lesson we wanted to prove from that is that the trust that a husband and wife and the fidelity that a husband and wife should have for one another should be unshakable. That unshakable fidelity and trust will always bring blessing to them, to their children, their grandchildren, their business, everything that they do. Being part and parcel with one spouse, literally as Adam and Chava were created, stuck. That is how one is supposed to act with their spouse, as one person. As the Nachmanides says, a person is supposed to look at their spouse as another limb of theirs. Yes, I have 2 hands. No, how many hands do I have? 4 hands. Because my wife's hands are my hands, and I have to care for them as much as mine. And so on to all of our body parts. We're supposed to care for our spouse just as much as if it was ours as well. Next, Ayin. The verse says, Oz ve'adar levusha. Strength and majesty are her attire. Vatishak leyom acharon, and she joyfully awaits the last day. The Zera Shimshon says, a wife who sends her husband to learn Torah, or brings her husband to learn Torah, like this evening, okay? She gets the exact merit as the husband who goes. We're soon going to see her merit's even greater. But the first source the Zera Shimshon brings is the Talmud that says a woman who sends her own husband to go away to learn Torah study, she gets that merit. Where do we see this from? Anybody? Very good, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva goes away 12 years, comes back, goes another 12 years. He's gone for 24 years. He comes back with no less than 24,000 students. Can you imagine what a number? What a following, what a teacher, what an order he must have been. He comes home, and it's a big to-do. The whole city comes out to greet him. And there was one little woman who was trying to get an audience, an appearance to the rabbi. And everyone was shoving her and pushing her away. And he sees from the corner of his eye this little Rachel and says, stop! Sheli v'shelachem shelahi. All of my merit, all of my Torah, and all of your Torah is her Torah. She is the one who pushed me to go study. I was an illiterate stable boy. I couldn't do anything except clean animals and help them graze. She pushed me to go learn. She infused in me that fire and that desire. And all of this is due to her. And from here we learn that all of the merit a person has from learning Torah is really duplicated and owed to their wife. Very important. Next, another Gemara says that a woman's reward is even greater. How so? Because when a man comes to learn Torah, sometimes they could get tired or sleepy and fall asleep. They might space out. They might not be concentrating or paying attention or putting all their effort into it. It doesn't matter for her, because she did her part. She now is missing that time with her husband, or if she takes her sons to go learn Torah, all of that merit is 100% for her because she did her part. Now it's on the men, it's on us to utilize that time and put the most amount of effort into it. But her effort was fully done. She gets complete merit and effort then. The Zohar tells us that anytime someone does a good deed, they are clothed with a spiritual garment. Based on these sources, the Zera Shimshon says something fascinating. He says, Oz means Torah. Strength is Torah. How do we know? As King David writes, O Hashem Oz le'amo iten. Hashem gives strength to his nation. How so? By learning Torah. So the Oz in the Pasuk is referring to Torah study. Hadar, which is beauty and glory, is mitzvot. As we know, there's a concept of hidur mitzvot, beautifying a mitzvah. Why do we get a beautiful lulav and a etrog? And why do we make sure that our tefillin are beautiful? And why do we make sure that any mitzvah that we do, why is our kiddush cup nice and silver and beautiful? It's because whenever we do a mitzvah, there's a concept of being mihader, doing a hidur, making it, beautifying it. So Zera Shimshon says, Oz vehadar, a woman's merit that she receives by sending her husband and even her children to go learn Torah and hadar and to do mitzvot. This is in her merit. Levusha, as we learned from the Zohar, she is now clothed with a spiritual garment, which is very, very special. Now, in this world she suffers. Why? Because she's not able to fulfill all the mitzvot like a man. And a woman would want to, theoretically, do whatever a man can do. She has other purposes, other needs to tend to. But she suffers from that. Nevertheless, Vatishak leyom acharon, she joyfully awaits the last days. Why? Listen to something fascinating. If it was worth it to come out to tonight's class just for this punchline, the Zera Shimshon quotes the Arizal that says, a woman who pushes her husband and children to learn Torah and fulfill mitzvot cannot come back as a reincarnation. we're aware that almost everybody comes back as a reincarnation.
Try again.
Second try, third try, fourth try. A woman who successfully pushes her husband and children, and more specifically her husband, believe it or not, to oz v'hadar, to learn Torah and fulfill mitzvot, she cannot come back as a reincarnation because she did her purpose. And that's what it means to say, Vatishak de'yom acharon, she joyfully awaits the last days. Why? Because when she passes away, her neshama is staying in heaven. It's not coming back as a reincarnation. This is the explanation of this verse. Meaning that we have to remind ourselves that all of our good merit and all of our great successes are all in the merit of our wives.
Can you say that verse again? I'm sorry, I want to write it down.
It's chapter 31, verse 25. You want English or Hebrew?
Either way.
Strength and majesty are her attire, and she joyfully awaits the last day. So strength is Torah, majesty is mitzvot, is her attire she's clothed with in merit of pushing her husband to do so, and she joyfully awaits the last days because she knows if she succeeds that, she will never come back as a reincarnation. Next verse. Pei. Piha patcha bechokma. Her mouth opens up with wisdom. V'torat chesed al lishona. And a lesson of kindness is on her tongue. The Zera Shimshon says, it's interesting. I don't know about you, but normally when a woman opens her mouth, there's a lot to be said. The Talmud says it, it's not even me. The Talmud says that women are like birds. They chatter non-stop. Now there's a good part to it and a bad part. You want me to tell you the good part? I'll start with the good news. The good news is that children need that aspect of having someone listen to them and speak, or maybe over-listen and even over-speak to them. That's the way they develop. Think of it. What's the attention span of a man? Close to none, right? Okay? What's the attention span of women? How long can women speak for? Speak and listen and speak and listen. Hours and hours, a lifetime's worth. So some could say, that's a deficiency. On the contrary, God created a woman as such in order that she can nurture and help her children develop in a healthy and proper way. Children need to express themselves and need to be expressed to. They need to be involved. And this is one of the great strengths that mothers have or should develop with their children. Specifically, making sure that they always have an ear that they can speak to, and that their parents are always sharing things with them and educating them along the right path. Very, very important. But the Talmud tells us that a woman talks a lot. So how could it be that piha patcha bechokma, that a wife, a woman of valor, her mouth opens and it's full of wisdom? Normally when a lot is spoken about, it's not a lot of wisdom. King Solomon writes in Kohelet, V'kol kesil berov devarim, meaning that the voice of a fool speaks a lot of words. So how are we saying, the Zera Shimshon says, that the woman opens her mouth and wisdom flows out? Just when the woman opens her mouth, it's a lot of words. A lot of words, there's got to be a lot of extra things over there. Okay? I didn't say this myself. Maybe I should have. Okay. Listen to what the Zera Shimshon says. He says, the Pasuk is teaching us that an intelligent woman, that a woman of valor, only speaks wisdom, only speaks intelligence. It's kind of like a royal queen, or a very, very, dignified woman, let's put it that way. A very dignified woman doesn't share everything with everybody, isn't always yapping around and talking around. No, it's like a whip. She opens her mouth, whoosh, it's a whip. It's straight to the point. Opposed to talking a little about this and a little about that, and 1,000 words were said, and we could have said that in a total of, depending on whose opinion you go with, 5 words or 10 words. Okay? But 1,000 words were said. No. An intelligent woman cuts right to the point, in something wise and something intelligent. Now, not only that, the Zera Shimshon says, she goes on and she educates others to do the same. And we learn this specifically from the verse. Look how the verse says, Piha patcha bechokma. Her mouth opens with wisdom, with short amount, straight to the point intelligence. V'torat chesed al lishona. And a lesson of kindness is on her tongue, and she educates others to do the same. This is a woman of valor. There's a story in the Gemara that Zera Shimshon brings of a certain rabbi. His name was... doesn't tell us. Okay. Certain rabbi came to a fork at a street, at a crossroad, and he found Rabbi Meir's wife, Beruya, very famous Talmudic, personality. And this sage asks her as follows, which road leads to Lod? He was trying to get to the city of Lod. Which road leads to Lod? So look how she answers him, I'm quoting you. Fool! Didn't the sages say not to talk too much with a woman? You should have simply said, which to Lod? And this, from here, the Zera Shimshon says that Beruya was such a wise and intelligent woman, a woman of valor, that she even taught others to get to the point. Sometimes you go to a speech, or you hear someone speak, and they're speaking for an hour or two. And you say to yourself, what did this person say? What they said, they could have said it in literally 2 seconds. You go to other places where it's 5 minutes and it means a lot. You go to places that in an hour, we cover so many different topics. There's different styles, but intelligence is cutting straight to the point and going right to the source of whatever is wisdom and important to be said. Last thing we'll mention for this evening, and this is short and very, very important apropos. This is Tzadi, letter Tzadi. It says, Sofia halichot beta velechem atzilut lo tochel. She anticipates the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of laziness. The Zera Shimshon says, is the halacha in the Shulchan Aruch that a worker is not allowed to skimp on meals. Why? Because if they don't eat well, they can't produce properly. You have an hourly wage. You're paid a certain amount per hour. If you don't eat well enough, you're not going to perform as well. He also tells us, that the Gemara tells us, if a person eats what's called pat shacharit, bread for breakfast, or grain for breakfast, they are saved from many different sicknesses, and they are also given a tremendous amount of strength. The strength amount of equal to 60 people who do not eat grain or bread in the morning. A person who eats bread or grain in the morning has 60 times the strength and power for that day. Based on this, the Zera Shimshon says something fascinating. You want to know how wise and how much of a woman of valor is able to foresee? She knows, Sofi halichot beta, she foresees, she anticipates what's coming today. What do I need to do today? Where do I need to go? How much energy do I need to put in? And then what does she do? She goes, she's not going to eat lazy bread. That means in the morning, when a very, very successful woman, a successful mother, a successful wife, she gets up and she knows automatically what the day looks like today. How much does she need to eat? If she wants to succeed the best, she should eat a good breakfast. This is good for everybody, men and women alike. But a woman of valor, automatically, it's that bina yetira, that extra dimension of knowledge and understanding that a woman has and wisdom that a woman has. She knows what's coming today, and she eats now in anticipation what's going to be today, because she's not going to eat when she's tired and worn out. A good woman who wants to have a successful day eats well in the morning. This is another example for us men to cherish our wives, for all these great lessons we learned about. So we'll just summarize these 4 lessons. The first we said is that the source of blessing in the home is based on one's wife. How? Through a common fidelity and trust from back one another. Then, the reward for a righteous wife is everlasting for her. When she sends her husband and her children to Torah and to do mitzvot, and it's something that she will maybe even bring her not to have a reincarnation. Then we said how silence is a virtue, and a true, wise woman of valor, speaks only what she needs to say and no more. And then we just ended off saying that eating properly adds to a woman's valor to have the most successful day in order to produce for her family. I know, like my wife, and I know like even my mother and other great women and mothers and wives, that they often forget about their own needs and themselves just because they care so much about everyone else. But it weighs down on them and it wears them down. It's very important to take care of your basic needs. It's a balance of not being selfish, but being not too selfless. There's a great quality in being selfless, but there could also be, unfortunately, a great detriment if a person doesn't balance it properly. Take care of your basic needs, strengthen yourself in the morning before you start your day, and then you're able to do more and better for your family. May Hashem bless us. May Hashem bless all those who need a spouse to find that woman of valor, or to find that knight in shining armor, right? And for all of us who are married, to make sure that we praise our wife. This Friday night, think of the intentions that Abraham sang Eshet Chayil with at his wife's eulogy. Think of the intentions King Solomon had when he wrote, through divine inspiration, almost 875 years later, the Eshet Chayil. And look at your wife in her eyes and truly and genuinely thank her for all that she has done this past week, if not even more. Thank you everyone for coming. Questions?